Gonna have a little bit of fun today. I am going to record a live version of the podcast. I'm going to shoot for doing this every Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning, my time. Excuse me, 10 o'clock in the morning, your time if you're on the East Coast, 7 o'clock in the morning, my time. And as you can see, we're off to an awesome start. Today, I want to talk about the theme for the week, which has been around that revenue challenge inside your business, maybe even inside your family, or for you personally, may actually be a culture challenge in disguise. And culture starts with leadership. Leadership starts with self. And if we take care of these things and put together a plan, we'll actually improve our ability to execute. If you've been following for a while, you know that simplifying things is really important to me. Sometimes the way that I share those things sounds simple in my head, but doesn't necessarily translate across the table. And typically, where I'm able to translate best is when working one-on-one or with small teams. I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of that today inside the podcast and kind of work through a couple of different models verbally, not use the whiteboard, even though I've got some things up on the whiteboard. And you can see on one side, on that side, I've got that revenue piece, the money, that's a dollar sign. The item that leads to that dollar sign is culture. The item that leads to the, and this is a looping process here, the item that leads to culture is leadership, and the piece that leads into leadership is execution, and then the money piece follows into execution. Anyhow, I'll share a visual of that. I can tell already this is some awesome audio. Plan is going to be to go about 25 minutes, and if people come up with questions inside the chat, because we're doing this live both on LinkedIn and YouTube, I'll answer those directly. Don't expect many. We're not seeing a lot of views in the live version of this, but I'll continue to test it. So let's talk about what I mean by that revenue challenge inside your business or inside your family or for self may actually be a culture challenge in disguise. I think the piece there, if we look at culture, my definition of culture specifically is how we do what we do. I know there are a lot of other definitions out there, and I went to Arizona State University. I graduated with a degree in psychology, and this is something, my experience here is more practical experience with culture than anything else. I mean, I've done a lot of reading, but you see this as you work across multiple organizations. And culture for me is how we do what we do. There's a culture in your household. There's a culture on your street. There's a culture that exists inside the organizations that you work in. And then it comes back to how we do what we do. So on that side, there are a couple of things I like to look at, and you can see them over my my right shoulder. People who are people. The human is the biggest part of this whole thing. It's the thing that makes all of it as complex as it is, because as much as we're simple, we have simple needs. Go to Maslow's hierarchy, right? So we have simple needs. We need air, water, food. Those are some big things. If we don't have those, we're not going to be around here very long. We have simple needs, but then things start to get really complex. And then we have this internal thing that goes on between our ears that gets in the way of our ability to communicate with others. And as Jody has said before on the podcast, it's the biggest problem with communication, or biggest mistake with communication, is believing that it actually happened. So we have people. That's one variable. The other variable we have our process. Now, those processes might actually be documented, laid out on a chart where you can see when A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, leads to E, etc., all the way through. Or they may not be documented, meaning you might have this thing that you kind of go through, and there's, I think the most simple process as an example is getting into your car to drive to the grocery store. You follow the same process really every time. You likely walk out a garage door, or you walk to your carport or wherever, but you have your keys in hand, you open the vehicle, you sit in the vehicle, you put the key in the ignition, you turn the ignition, you put the vehicle into reverse or drive, depending on how you get out of your garage or your parking spot, and you go through and follow the rest of it. And you don't need to document that. You just do it over and over and over again. It becomes natural, and you won't even think about it as a process. Some processes happen organically. Others are built by design. And one of the things that I think is really cool is when you can take a combination of organic and process, or the organic aspects of process, and use it to inform design, so you design naturally. I'll give you an example there. If you've ever seen the picture of a park where they have a sidewalk, and the sidewalk goes at a 90-degree angle. Let's say one sidewalk goes north and south, and the other sidewalk is going east and west. But for whatever reason, on the grass, there's an arc around the corner of that sidewalk, and that's where all of the people walk. Well, that's the organic thing that happens. The design was the sidewalk that had a 90-degree angle. The organic thing, where the humans got involved, is the trail that they create where they cut those corners. So we have processes. We also have tools. Tools provide us with leverage. Processes provide us with consistency, repeatable, predictable results. If we follow the process, the outcome that we expect is the same if we follow the process appropriately, or if it's a good process. Tools, on the other hand, actually provide leverage. Think about a hammer. If I'm going to hammer in a nail, I get the leverage of the length of that lever that I'm using to hammer in the nail, and I can create more power, more velocity, and I can get that nail in more directly. If I happen to be in one of those times where I had to hammer a nail in with a stone, I'd be in a little bit of trouble. I wouldn't be able to get that same arc, that same kind of power behind or leverage behind the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. Tools provide leverage. When you combine process and tools together, you create systems. Some of these systems are integrated. Think of your CRM, your ERP, and maybe your learning management system. You could have those three systems integrated with each other. If those are working really well with each other, you've got complete line of sight to access of information that's happening inside the business. When people miss on certain things, you've got an opportunity to train them directly so you can get them into the LMS. So process, things that happen in a specific order. Some of those processes are linear, some of them are looping. Things happen in a specific order. Tools create leverage. Systems are the combination of multiple processes and multiple tools. The systems are the things that we operate in. How does this apply to culture? Well, if how we do what we do is important relative to culture, like I said that it was and believe that it is, then you get yourself into a situation where you say, okay, well, how do our people do what they do, leveraging either process, tools, or the overarching system that they operate in? If those are not defined inside your organization, how do you expect to build a positive culture in your business? I mean, come on, can you really answer the question, how do we do what we do? Now, there are a number of things that end up influencing this part of culture. So one of the things I like to think about from a process perspective is decision making. We talk about that a lot on the podcast. One of the tools that I use for decision making as an individual level are values. What are the things I value? When working across multiple teams, multiple people, then you start to get into things like guiding principles. So inside your organization, and I get hung up on this language a lot, inside your organization, your guiding principles are things that are organization-wide. They combine everybody inside the company. It's how we do what we do, what's the order of importance, and ultimately, how do we use that information to inform decisions? I do not believe that you can impress your values on your people. Your values are your values. My values are a little bit different than Jen's values. We're relatively aligned on what we value. My values are a little bit different than Sean's or Andrew's. Sean's values are different than Andrew's. We're individual human beings. This is the complicated part of that people thing. Don't attempt to impress your values on others. Learn what other people value, and then you can align the things that you're working on in context. Principles, on the other hand, those are defined by the organization. They're defined by the team. So we might have some guiding principles inside the family, and one of the ones that we use now, thanks to a friend of ours, Camille Clemens, is work hard, be nice. Work hard, be nice. It's really easy to go through the process and say, did I work really hard on this? Yes or no. If not, then work harder. get it done. If I did the work, am I being nice? If no, be nicer. Like, two simple things: work hard, be nice. Work hard, be nice. And thanks, Camille, for sharing that. There's so much stuff that goes on inside our head, and we want to know, hey, why did we fail on this thing, or why are things not working? Why are we not moving forward? Why are we not getting to where we want to go? Well, that's we can go and we can assess ourselves against principles that are important to us inside the family. And so, culture, how we do what we do. This is not music, this is not games, this is not food, this is not, I mean, we might say that the barbecue improves culture because we value getting together in a non-work environment so that we can learn more about the people who are around us and see them as individual people, not as ones and zeros that do specific roles inside our business, but as people who have families that they provide for, as people who have their own internal needs that they want to cover. So that revenue challenge inside your business, with your family, for yourself, may actually be a culture challenge in disguise. And my view of culture is how we do what we do, and we just walk through the people, process, tools, and systems component. So let's talk about leadership. Well, that culture starts with leadership. Culture starts with leadership, and leadership starts with self. So how do we get better as leaders? Well, let's take my definition of leadership. It's how we move forward. How we move forward. Very simple definition, how we move forward. The cool thing about moving forward can be multiple directions. Like that direction might shift forward if I'm driving from Phoenix to Anaheim is a bit different than forward if I'm driving from Phoenix to Orlando. They're two different locations, so I need to understand kind of like where am I and where are we going. So let's have a goal, let's have an objective, let's have a place, let's have a vision, let's have a mission that we're working toward. And you can go through this and kind of figure out, use some of the Salesforce stuff, V2 Mom, vision, values, methods, obstacles, metrics, and start to figure out from a leadership perspective, am I aligned with what I want to do with self, or am I aligned with another person that I might be leading? Right? If you can't lead self, you've not earned the right to lead another person. And then when you're leading that other person, if you struggle with leading that other person, then you've got to figure out that alignment piece there. When you've determined or been able to lead another person well, lead others well, then you earn the right to move into leading teams. And then at some point in time, you might be fortunate enough to lead teams of teams. When you're leading teams of teams, it is extremely important that you use things like process, tools, systems to help build scale across that leadership, because you will not always be with them, and you don't always want to be with them. You want people to do their work on their own. If they don't know what work to do, how do they know, how can you expect them to do the work that you want them to do? How can you expect them to perform in a way that you want them to perform? How can they get the best out of themselves if they really don't know what to do? So then you've got to ask those questions. Well, why do they not know what to do? Do they understand what moving forward is? Like what we're moving forward toward? That moving forward could be in the context of some of the principles that are important to you. Like moving forward to create where safety is critical inside our business. You could also get yourself into a situation where you're saying, okay, employee first, customer first. There are no right or wrong answers. That's the cool part about it. But you have to have an answer. And when you have that answer, what you can do is you can create this magnet, this attraction that starts to attract people to you, attract people to your business, attract the right customers, and repel those who are not the right fit, because fit matters. And if you don't have a view toward the future, how can you determine fit? So, revenue challenge, it's likely a culture challenge in disguise, how we do what we do. Culture starts with leadership, how we move forward. Leadership starts with self. So, figure out what you want to accomplish. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to build something on your own, solopreneur? Do you want to build something and hire a number of people inside your organization and potentially sell that business, an entrepreneur? Do you want to build inside an organization, an entrepreneur? Or do you want to build but you don't even know where to start and you're not sure what that would be like a wantrepreneur, right? So the first time I heard wantrepreneur was by Seth Godin a number of years ago. So we've got these preneurs. Preneurs are leaders who think different so that they can do different. That is a very different type of leader than a leader who really likes to manage process or manage people or manage functions. There's a difference between leadership and management. Management comes into play when you understand all the people, you understand all the process, you understand the tools and systems, and you work to hold people accountable to using those properly. You've already built them. Leadership, on the other hand, I like to look at it as, again, that how we move forward. So there are things that we're going to build, things that we're going to test, things that we're going to do to put us in a position where we think different so that we can do different. Again, leadership starts with self. On that side, there are a couple of processes to go through. Number one, what do you want? What do you want? I think that's really important. Understand kind of what do you want? Like what are your wants and needs? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? Where's that forward thing? What do you want to do next? If you know what you want, you know where you want to go, you know what you want to do next, then you're in a position to be a really good leader. The next thing that I want people to do in that leadership role, and this is going to sound a lot like some of the process stuff as it relates to culture, but I want them to have some kind of decision-making framework. How do they make decisions? Map against their values, use things like 2x2s to change dimensions. How do you make decisions to help lead self better? How do you hold yourself accountable to doing the work that you said you're going to do? I like to use checklists. Daily checklists for specifically around things like fitness as an example, and I've shared those whiteboards before. So leadership. In the context of leadership, you'll have your processes, you'll have your tools, and you'll have your systems. The challenge is if you're operating as a leader without any of those things, it'd be kind of like jumping in a car and driving from Phoenix to Orlando without a map or without a GPS. How do you stay on track? How do you know where you're going? How do you know you're moving in the right direction? So that gets into execution. And execution for me is about getting things done by leveraging things like clarity, focus, and planning. Clarity, focus, and planning. And then there's a reflective process to determine, is the work that I'm doing actually working? Because if it's not, I need to fire it. And this is where you get into the game plan. And this is the whole background on the game plan. The game plan is really my own personal operating system to getting things done. And there are a number of people who have created their own operating systems. There's operating systems for entrepreneurs like EOS. There's management operating systems like Mind from ETW. There are other operating systems like OKRs. There are MBOs. These are systems. Again, this piece right here, systems, organization of multiple processes tools to help you achieve the thing that you want, either as an individual or as an organization. The one that I prefer, the one that I lean on, the one that I designed and developed, standing on the shoulders of giants, is the game plan. That's goal setting and execution through clarity and focus. We understand what our goal is, what's our objective, what are we looking to accomplish. We define our three-pronged strategy that we're going to test to help us get closer to achieving that goal. That's the how. How are we going to bucket all of the work? Then we identify the specific work, the tactics that we're going to apply to get us from point A to point B, to help us make progress, to help us move forward. And if we understand our goals, we understand our actions, we understand our metrics, we are on the path to executing, and that's the GAME acronym for a game plan. And you can build out your game plan. It's pretty simple. You can build out a game plan for having an amazing Thanksgiving dinner, which will happen here in the next 5 months or so. You can build out a game plan to go get eggs at the grocery store. You don't need to, but you can. The cool thing about finding small things to build a game plan around is you start to test the skills. You put the skills into practice. You learn about where your challenges are, what works, what doesn't work, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So, if we solve for each of these things, we have a plan. we have an objective, we have a strategy, we have some tactics, and we have a plan, and we work that plan, we will be better leaders. As we go through and understand where we're going, how we're going to do it, what our potential obstacles are, what metrics we're going to use to put in place to help inform whether or not we're actually making progress, be better leaders of self, we will build a better culture, have a culture around that view of how we do what we do. How do we make money? How do we serve our customers? How do we, internal or external? That will drive greater revenue growth inside your organization, for your family, and for yourself, depending on the lens that you're looking at this challenge through. So when I talk out loud about that revenue challenge is actually a culture challenge in disguise, or maybe a culture challenge in disguise, and culture starts with leadership, and leadership starts with self, this is what I'm talking about. And that self-operating system will help you with the execution. Hope this is helpful. End up going 21 minutes right now. I do not see any questions in here, but I also may not be looking at the right place, so we'll figure that piece out. I would like to turn this Thursday recording into a Q&A session. Any questions in order to do that? Now I can make up some questions and come in and say, hey, Bob from Poughkeepsie asked about this, or Jill from San Diego asked about this. It's better if the questions come directly from you. And what's really cool is if you have a question, it is your obligation as a leader to ask that question. Because some others out there may not feel confident asking that question. It's one of the things I start with whenever I'm doing a workshop, whenever I'm doing a guided discussion. It's when we're talking through stuff. We do this in the Phoenix Club as well. If you have a question, it is your obligation to ask that question, because somebody else in the group might not have the confidence to ask that question. And that you asking that question is actually an act of service, an act of serving others. So if you have questions related to leadership, culture, revenue, execution, ask them, and I'll incorporate them into the podcast. Again, we're going to do this every Thursday at 7 o'clock my time, 10 o'clock your time if you're on the East Coast, and you'd have to do the time zone math for all the other places you're potentially logging in on. When from a call to action perspective, what I'd ask you to do is, if you're not generating the kind of revenue that you want, either inside your organization or for your family or for self, take a look at these other categories and just say, is it clear? Do I have high level of clarity around how I do what I do? Can I say that out loud? Do I understand all the processes and tools and systems that I'm applying? If I don't, then let's build some of those. If I do, then maybe we need to iterate on those or start tweaking some of those to kind of figure out a way that they can work so we can get out there and slay the things that we want to slay. If we've got the processes and tools and systems in place, and this is all iterative, so you're always going to adjust these. You're going to have new tools that you want to apply, and I would suggest that you eliminate before you accelerate. Let's simplify. Let's not create complexity. These don't need to be really complex things. Then let's take a look at the leadership piece. Am I being a really good leader of self? Do I actually do what I say I'm going to do? If not, why? What else is getting in the way? What else is being prioritized? What are my values? What are my principles? And if I've got that piece in place, then let's take a look at that execution piece. And you can go there first. You can go to the execution piece. And I would suggest that you go to the execution piece first, because if you want to get this stuff kind of moving around, you've got to have a plan. You have to have a goal. You have to have a strategy. You have to have some tactics to create predictability and repeatability. If you don't, you're kind of just shooting in the wind and hoping. And hope is not a strategy, although rebellions have been built on hope. It is not a strategy. Hope this was helpful. If you have questions, contact me either directly via direct message inside the comments, or get a hold of my cell phone. It's out there. Send me a text message. Let me know that you heard it on this podcast. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process? Please share this with someone who might find it valuable. Thank you.